This is the You Can Learn Chinese podcast, part of the Seneca Network from Sup China. For everyone who's trying to learn Chinese or reaching for the next level, you came to the right place. I am your host, Jared Turner, longtime resident of China, co-founder of the Mandarin Companion Graded Reader Series, and I like my women like I like my passwords. Same one for the last 20 years. My co-host is John Pasden, co-founder of Mandarin Companion, founder of All Set Learning, the Chinese Grammar Wiki, Sinosplice.com, and got kicked out of the Procrastinators Club for showing up to its first meeting. WeChat is the most popular instant messaging platform in China. In this episode, John and I are going to tell you tricks and tips on how to use WeChat to learn Chinese. Interview is with Matt McGill, star actor on the popular YouTube China expat comedy channel Mamahuhu. All this and more, let's get to it. Hey guys, this is Jared Turner coming at you from Utah in the United States.
Hi everybody, my name is John Pasden. I am located in Shanghai, China. How's it going?
All right, John, before we kick in today, we do have a review, and it came from Instagram for the user Ding Chinese. She says, these are the first graded readers I've ever read. I first read about a year and a half ago, and at the time I couldn't actually believe I was able to understand it. There were parts that I didn't understand, some grammar structures or phrases I wasn't familiar with, but I was able to read a book in Chinese. I've read all of the Mandarin Companion Starter and Level 1 books since then, and my reading ability has improved massively. I've reread these books, and it's been so much easier than it was the first time. All right, well, I'm really happy to hear that, Ding Chinese. Thanks for giving us a little bit of a shout-out and a review for using some of the books, and they're also a very avid listener to the podcast. So, hey, this can happen for you too.
Awesome. Thank you. We know it's a great feeling to be able to actually read books for the first time in Chinese. Keep it going. Okay, so today's topic is software that everyone in China uses every day, all day long. Like you can't study Chinese or you can't live in China without using WeChat, right? It is ubiquitous. It is so important.
Oh, yes. WeChat is like the 800-pound gorilla? Maybe 2,000-pound. I don't know. Just put that weight up there really high because it is, everyone pretty much uses it in China.
Yeah, it's hard to compare it to any kind of software like in the U.S. It's more like comparing it to an operating system or something. It is just so common. In fact, I think, Jared, you even have some stats over there.
That's right. So this is just gives you an idea of like how big WeChat is in China. So it has over 1.2 billion monthly active users. That's huge. 78% of people in China that are age 16 to 64, they're using WeChat. And in America, at least, they have about 1.5 million monthly active users. So that gives you a little bit of idea of like how many people are using WeChat. It's a lot. I think, even in some of the larger cities, the penetration is like over 90-something%. Like I have yet to really meet anyone that in Shanghai that doesn't have WeChat. I mean, there's like, I met a homeless guy on the street and chatting with him, and then it turns out he had WeChat. Someone's grandma who was like in her late 80s, she has WeChat. I mean, everybody's got WeChat.
If you go on the subway and you just look at what people are looking at on their phone, because, almost everyone is looking at their phone. Almost all of them are looking at WeChat. A couple of people are playing games. It's just everywhere. It's hard to imagine if you've never been to China.
That's right. And sometimes those games are mini programs on WeChat, which we're not going to talk about here. But there are so many things that WeChat can do. You can pay your bills and stuff. Like, we're not going to get into the whole payment side of things, but it's a pretty fascinating kind of all-in-one app. But mainly what people are using it for is for communication.
All right. So what we want to talk about today is not just what is WeChat, but rather how can you use WeChat to improve your Chinese, WeChat specifically. And before we get into that, let's do a little side topic, which is if you're not in China, say you're in the U.S. or you're in Australia or you're in Austria or something, should you get WeChat? Because obviously if you're in China, it's super useful, but how useful is it if you're not in China? So Jared, you have WeChat. You're not in China. What do you think?
Well, my life is rather connected to China. So yes, I actually do use WeChat pretty much every day because, hey, John, that's how we stay in touch. And I have my other dealings with China. through WeChat there. But I would say that if I wasn't speaking Chinese and if I didn't have any connection to China, then I probably wouldn't be using it very often.
Yeah, I can understand why some people wouldn't really want to install Chinese software on their phone if they didn't really need it. But if you do have plans to visit China, then you're definitely going to want to have WeChat up and running before you go. Like, you won't necessarily be managing your entire life on WeChat while you're in China, but just anyone you meet that you want to stay in touch with, you're going to need to connect on WeChat.
That's right. And here's the truth of the matter is, as I've gone throughout my career, and I've found people here in the States who are not Chinese, but they're somewhat connected to China, they speak Chinese, they're going to have WeChat. I mean, it's going to be that 9 times out of 10. Occasionally, I'll find someone who doesn't. But I'm like, that's when I give them like weird looks. I'm like, really? But most people are going to have WeChat on their phone.
So if you're thinking about going to China, like hopefully this epidemic is, fading. But if you're thinking about going to China and you're like, oh, maybe I should get WeChat, one little word of warning, it may not be as simple as just downloading it, the day before you go to China. It's kind of complicated. Like you have to get your account verified by someone else who uses WeChat. So plan a little bit ahead. It's not going to happen quite as quickly as you might think.
Yeah, and some of the reasons behind that, just so you know, is that it's trying to prevent a lot of like spam accounts and like bots, getting access to WeChat. So it was a little bit onerous. It wasn't like that at the very beginning, but it is now. So you kind of do need to know someone else who has WeChat to get your account verified so you can use WeChat.
All right. So all that's out of the way. Assuming you have WeChat and you're learning Chinese, how are you going to use it? Okay. So first of all, it's at its core, it's a chat app. So you want to connect with other people. If you don't already have at least one friend on WeChat, you're going to want to find someone, add them. But one question people sometimes ask is, if I don't know too many Chinese people, how do I find friends on WeChat?
This is a great question. And how would you go about that, John?
Well, you'll see on some websites talking about WeChat that you can like look for people nearby. And you can do that, but I don't know. I don't think I recommend that. I feel like in the early days of WeChat, it was a little more safe and everyone was just curious and friendly. But now I feel like it's a lot of spammers and scammers, and it's not necessarily a good idea. So do that at your own risk.
Well, here's what I will say, and I'll give you guys a quick guide. If you have WeChat, down at the bottom there's a tab that says Discover. You click on that, and there's that live streams in nearby. Now, John, I will say that, there in China, you're going to get a lot more of those scammers and everything. But if you are not in China and you are in a non-Chinese speaking environment, it's a little bit easier to find people who are probably just want to chat or are just looking to have a conversation. And I have noticed that. Now, where I'm at, there's like very few Chinese people. But if I'm in a larger city, I've done that, and I've been able to find just all sorts of people who are there, and you can just you can send a message, hey, what's up, or whatever. You can start trying to chat with people.
Yeah, I have had some success with it. I don't know, just do it at your own risk, I guess. But assuming you do have some friends, you're chatting with people. Let's talk a little bit about these messages because like many chat apps, you can text, you can send voice messages, you can send images. But WeChat has some cool functionality built in for stuff like transcribing voice messages and for translating text.
Definitely.
Like the translations used to be so bad. I remember when they first launched it, it was just so bad. I felt sorry for anybody who was trying to actually use it and communicate. But now it's actually not that bad. I mean, if you're learning Chinese, you're probably going to copy paste and then maybe paste into Pleco. But if you just need a quick translation or something, or there's just like one word you don't know, it can actually be quite useful.
So to give you a little clearer idea about this, so say you're chatting with someone on WeChat and you're using Chinese and they respond to you and you don't understand what's going on. You can hold down on that message and you can say, translate, and it'll pop up a translation in English or whatever your language is down below. And it's definitely very convenient, very cool. But as John said, sometimes you just need to copy and paste that. Hey, Pleco is a great opportunity. You can copy and paste that into the clip reader. and you can go through and maybe dissect what's being said character by character.
And so if someone sends you a voice message, you can also transcribe it. So you do the long tap, and then you get the transcript, and then it actually writes out what the person is saying. And it's fairly accurate. And one thing that I've seen a lot of people do, which is kind of interesting, is send themselves a voice message. Like you can send it to your own file transfers. It's like your own little, chat with yourself. And you can send yourself a voice message in Chinese, and then you can transcribe your own message to see if your Chinese was clear enough for WeChat to transcribe it correctly.
Oh, that's a really good idea. I'd never thought of that, John.
Oh, yeah. Lots of people are doing it, man.
Well, I've got to get on that train. But hey, man, yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff like what you can do there flexibility-wise and how you can use the language on WeChat. Now, the cool thing about WeChat is that it is built for Chinese native speakers. So it's not like it was an app that was developed for, I guess, English or other language speakers, and then it's trying to put the Chinese functionality into it. No, it's for Chinese native speakers, and then they've got all this other functionality into it for non-native Chinese speakers or people who maybe don't even speak Chinese at all, and they need to communicate or are trying to communicate with Chinese speakers who may not speak any English.
Yeah, and one thing that's cool about it is that the language setting of the app itself is separate from your operating system. So, like for example, on my iPhone, I have the operating system set to English, but I have the WeChat interface set to Chinese, and so I like to see what other Chinese people are seeing as well for all the buttons and menus and everything. But I still like to have my phone in English because I don't know, it's comforting. So a lot of people, they might start out with WeChat entirely in English, but once their Chinese gets to a certain level, they can switch over to Chinese and they don't have to mess with the language of the operating system. So that's kind of cool. Oh, but getting back to the actual core text functionality. So, just like a lot of other countries, people, the Chinese also like to send animated GIFs with their text messages, and they have Chinese text on them. And some of them are so funny or just so interesting that you just find yourself studying the text on the GIFs because you just want to know what it says. And so it's a cool kind of, random motivation to learn some new words and some new characters. And then the other thing it can do, which is kind of similar, is if you have an image in WeChat and it has Chinese characters in it, WeChat can extract the text from the images. Now, I know other apps can do that too, but you can do it just right within WeChat. It's kind of cool.
That is a super cool functionality too. So, someone sends you an image or whatever, you're like, hey, maybe this can help. And yeah, it can pull stuff in. It does pretty well. Now, another nice thing about WeChat is that there's this ability to form groups, like chat groups on WeChat. And, we have those for text messaging here in our Western world, but it's really efficient in WeChat. And people able to share, images, videos, articles, whatever within these groups. Now, I'm a member of a number of groups, and it's easy to share information. But I'm in part of a number of Chinese groups, and so sometimes I'm a little more passive participant in those. But you can go through and read what's been going on, read the conversation, and sometimes it might come across something I'm not exactly sure what they're saying. Well, boom. You can hold down that translation function and see like, oh, okay, all right, I get it now, or do some copy and pasting. So the group functionality is really cool, and I will say we do have a group for Mandarin Companion, and we have about we have a number about 80 people in that. But groups are really powerful and a very cool thing about WeChat.
Yeah, so it's a chance to be a fly on the wall and just see what people are talking about. Probably the ones that I have to look out the most, just like any other parent in China, are the school WeChat groups. Yeah. The teachers sending out stuff to everyone in the kids' classes. And I can't say that's fun, but that's a big part of my WeChat experience. Like, groups are both a blessing and a curse. Like, if you live in China and you're in a lot of groups, it's just so much to keep up with. It's like having email all over again. Yeah,
the good thing, you can silence notifications on groups, which I have many groups which notifications are silenced. Yeah, it's because your phone's buzzing nonstop otherwise.
You gotta. But, if you're just in a few groups, then that's fine. It's totally manageable. Okay, so now for one of the key features for language learners using WeChat is the moments, the 朋友圈. And so this is where you can share stuff and other people can see it, and then you have your own feed full of your friends' stuff that they're sharing. And it's not filtered at all. You can hide what your friends are showing if you want to because they're sending out boring stuff. But you just get to see all your Chinese friends, the kind of stuff they share, the photos, the text, the videos. And it can be a really interesting way to learn about, your Chinese friends in a sort of indirect way.
Yeah, definitely. And think of it a little bit like a cross between, Twitter or Facebook or, where you have a wall and you're posting things. So yeah, and it's a great opportunity if you do make Chinese friends. Chinese people seem to be very active about posting on WeChat. So, you'll be able to go through and see what's going on in their life. But, what I like about that, John, is that, usually people are posting pictures along with some sort of text. And so it gives you a little more context for what you're trying to read. And it's helped me to learn some more, I guess, things related to, pop culture or current events or, some things that maybe I wouldn't have learned about otherwise. And some slang and stuff like that. So, looking through and the WeChat moments, it's really cool, and you definitely can learn some stuff.
Also, if you want to be a little more proactive, you can do some really cool stuff. Like you see something, you don't know what it is, and you share a photo in your moments, and you ask, what is this? And then, all your Chinese friends start telling you stuff that you never would have known otherwise. Or maybe you're in the U.S. and you're taking a picture of something, and you make a comment about, does this happen in China or whatever? And then you get all this commentary. It's really cool because if you're someone who's kind of shy and you're not good at starting conversations, then you can do this on your own time, take as long as you want, and you can have this asynchronous interaction.
Definitely. And furthermore, John, on that note, you could post something in Chinese, and you could try to ask for feedback or maybe something you've typed out or whatever, trying to, solicit some sort of interaction with some Chinese learners solicit some sort of interaction with some Chinese speakers in Chinese. And it can be a great tool for that as well.
One of the other things that you can do, I've had some clients that do this where they give themselves a challenge. Every day they're going to post something on WeChat. It has to be at least one sentence, even if it's super simple. And just keep doing it. And then you get interaction. And the interaction gets you, commenting and replying. And it just has all kinds of cool organic results.
So there's definitely a lot of opportunities here, but there's even more, right, John?
Yeah, I think those are the most important ones, especially the messages and the moments. But there are tons of articles shared in WeChat, and then you can follow the source of the articles. So if you just can't get enough Chinese language articles, then, WeChat can be your never-ending stream of reading material.
So just to give you guys, how this all works, that there are public WeChat accounts. So that's like a company or an organization that would set up, a WeChat account that you can follow. And usually, if you follow someone, they'll publish articles through their WeChat account, and it pushes it out into a special feed. So if you're able to find, a special interest or something that you want to know more about, or some sort of industry or things like that in Chinese, on WeChat, usually you can find some sort of company's public account or some organization public account, and they're going to be constantly publishing material out on that as articles on WeChat. So that gives you, as John's mentioning, an endless supply of stuff to read. And this goes back to some of the things we've talked about before, John. Some people say, "Oh, I want to read the newspaper in Chinese." Well, you just say, "Well, do you really?" But hey, sometimes finding your interest or your special interest or something you want to know more about in Chinese is going to be helpful. And WeChat can be a great avenue to find that type of content.
Yeah, and this is something that you don't need to treat as an inbox that you have to check. I mean, you just browse it whenever you feel like it. Maybe something looks interesting, you want to check a caption on a photo or whatever. Just pick and choose, and you just got plenty of interesting stuff to choose from, always updating.
Now, we can't vouch for the level appropriateness of this content because it's going to be largely written for natives. But I do know, John, that I think there are some, WeChat accounts out there which create content for Chinese learners. So, there's stuff out there along with all sorts of, I won't get into the videos. So there is stuff out there.
Okay, and then one other thing I should mention is that WeChat kind of competes with TikTok. So if you're in another country like the US and you use TikTok, then that's like the US TikTok, and the Chinese TikTok is totally separate, Douyin. But if you are using WeChat, then you can use the WeChat equivalent of TikTok, which has a bunch of Chinese videos. So if you're into videos, there's another source of Chinese videos.
Endless source, that's for sure. So that's WeChat. WeChat is the 20,000-pound gorilla. That gorilla just keeps getting heavier. But it's just, it's huge. It's huge all over China, and it is an excellent way to connect with Chinese people. And like I said, there's a lot of functions in it that you can find people to talk with. But John, I will say this, is that especially if you're not in China and you do happen to meet some Chinese person and have a conversation with them, if you say, do you have WeChat? 有微信吗? They're going to be like, what? Really? Yes, of course I do. And then you pull out your WeChat, and there's they scan you, or you scan their QR code, and you try to connect as friends on there. They're really impressed when you've got WeChat.
But do remember, if you go to China, you want WeChat, and just start working on it a little bit ahead of time, because you're going to need a little bit of time to get that account working.
Definitely. And it's so much better these days, though. And I will even say that, there's some software you can put on your computer, so it interfaces with your phone and computer. It makes things really convenient. So, yeah, WeChat is a great way to get out there and start practicing your Chinese. And I will say, John, that when I first started learning Chinese, how I really started learning characters was by using QQ, which was the predecessor to WeChat, same company. It just kind of morphed into WeChat. And I really appreciated that time, and because, man, I learned so much by just chatting with people online, and it helped me learn a lot of phrases and a lot of stuff. So I highly recommend it if you want to just even get a little more conversational, start trying to use and practice with your Chinese. Get WeChat, and you'll definitely find people to speak with.
All right, you can learn Chinese.
All right, now it's time for a word from our sponsor. And today our sponsor is
Mandarin Companion Graded Readers.
That's right, and today we are talking about our Mandarin Companion Breakthrough Level Graded Reader, Just Friends.
This is the easiest Chinese romance you will ever find. And it is quite exciting because it's a love triangle.
That's right. It's not Romance of the Three Kingdoms. It's romance of these three individuals. Well, these two guys, which have an eye for this one girl, and they agree, not to try to date her. But then someone breaks the truce, and oh man, it's on.
You know where that was going.
Gloves are off. Anyway, so it's pretty funny, actually. We had a lot of fun writing this book. It's one of our original stories. Overall, it's had pretty good reviews.
Yep, so that's a breakthrough level book, 150 unique characters. It's definitely very accessible if you're still in like the elementary range and you're looking for something to read that's kind of like a, college kid story.
So go out there and get it today. It's Just Friends, our Mandarin Companion Breakthrough Level Graded Reader, using only 150 basic characters. You can find it on Amazon, iBooks, Kobo, or wherever you get your books. All right, now it's time for rants and raves. John, what do you have for us today? Do you have a rant or do you have a rave?
I'm going negative, Jared. I have a rant. Well, it's a little bit of a rave too, but it's mostly a rant. So I have this thing going on tomorrow where I'm doing a talk with some Chinese teachers about various resources for learning Chinese. And the guy who's organizing it, a Chinese teacher here in Shanghai, he asked me to use Tencent meetings. But I'm in this situation where I'm kind of like stuck between two countries, between two cultures. So like I have my iPhone in English with the American App Store, and I cannot download this app because it's a Chinese app and it's only in the Chinese App Store. So it's like, oh, no problem, just download the international version, VOOV. So I'm like, okay, so I get VOOV, and it's like, oh, you can't register because you have a Chinese phone number. You have to use Tencent meetings. Okay, so I'm stuck. But the rave is that WeChat has these things called mini programs, and I can actually get the functionality of Tencent meetings, which is kind of like Zoom, on your phone, these video conference apps. I can get it all through the mini program without having to install a new app. So that's kind of cool.
Wow, that is cool. And I think that highlights, mini programs. We didn't really talk about that but they're kind of like programs within a program. So it's like an app within WeChat, right?
Like a mini program? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. It's like a mini program within a program.
All right. Anyway, that's all I got. So, Jared, what do you got? Rant or rave?
All right, I got a rave. This, I thought this was fun. Okay, I came across this a little while ago, and it's in the Marvel universe, Marvel comic books, specifically Totally Awesome Hulk number 15. So it has Shang-Chi and the Incredible Hulk, which is actually not the Incredible Hulk. It's actually the Totally Awesome Hulk. Well, it has the scene in the comic book where Shang-Chi, Jimmy Woo, and Amadeus Cho, who's actually the Totally Awesome Hulk, they are at a Asian restaurant and they start fighting over the check who's going to be able to pay, and so it turns into some superhero battle inside the restaurant, and guess who ends up paying the bill? Amadeus Cho does. So the Totally Awesome Hulk. So he hulks out and he gets the check and pays. So anyway, I just thought it was hilarious. I'm thinking there because the two guys are Chinese, but actually I don't think it's really specific. It might have been a Japanese restaurant. But beside the point, I thought it was just totally hilarious because this is one of those, dynamics sometimes that gets made fun of. And I've seen it, you've seen it, John, right? Where some people are fighting to pay the check in China. And the reason being is, because it's a mianzi, right? It's you get face, so to speak. And, if you're the one who doesn't pay, it's a mei mianzi, you're gonna duo lian, right? You're gonna lose some face if you don't do that. So I thought it was hilarious. They tapped into one of those cultural Chinese things here in a Marvel comic book, and it's funny, John. It's amusing. Hey guys, this interview aired on April 8th, 2019, on episode number 7, The Myth of Learning Chinese Like a Child. It's a great one. Enjoy.
What a great little office this is. I don't know, you viewers can't see this, but this is cool.
That is Matt McGill. We sat down for an interview in our Shanghai office. He moved to China over 7 years ago from Scotland.
Now I'm from China, it seems.
Some might call Matt a Scottish version of Harrison Ford. He's an actor who started out as a carpenter. And today, he and his brother head up the most popular YouTube comedy channel in China called Mamahuhu. One thing that makes Matt's story unique is that he learned Chinese by himself. Never went to a day of class. Stay tuned.
My brother's always been a very film-orientated guy, always had a camera in his hand, so we decided we would start doing videos here. That became a business, and then it also became a great hobby. So we started a show called Mamahuhu, which is becoming more and more popular here in China, especially Shanghai. Well, we describe it as being a kind of a bridge between cultures. It's kind of, you laugh at both sides. Nobody's ever the victim. Everyone gets to laugh at it, Chinese or foreign. And we just try to point out those things that always come up, the classic issues of being a foreigner in China or Chinese meeting foreigners, that kind of thing.
Well, I love your videos. We've actually mentioned them a couple times on our show here.
Thank you very much.
Well, Matt, I want to hear a little bit about your story about how you learned Chinese. Even tell us about your story about coming here. How did this all come together with a confluence of where you now are a Chinese speaker?
Wow, that's an interesting story. My original plan was I was going to go through China, check out China, and go to Australia to work there because as I said to you before, I was a carpenter. And I heard that Australia was paying big bucks for carpentry, so I was on my way there. Landed in China, and I don't know what happened. I just kind of fell in love with the place. Something about it, it just really caught me, and I just never ever left after that.
Did you speak any Chinese when you came here?
Not a word. So one of my first group of friends here were a bunch of Americans, and they were all very fluent in Chinese. We used to go to bars and things like that, and trying to talk to any kind of girl and you're trying to use your English or maybe one word of Chinese that you've learned over the years, and you can't get the message across, and in swips your American friend with his fantastic Chinese, and this just really got to me. It got to me at a level that drove me to want to learn how to speak this language, but not enough that I wanted to take classes, strangely enough. So I was in this kind of weird place where I want to know this language. I want to know how do you do this language, but I also don't really, I can't do the class thing. Since I was a child, I can't really take knowledge in that way. I get very distracted in class. I was always a bit of a class clown, as they call them.
I'm not sure I believe that.
Yeah, well, I was always that guy, and I just couldn't. I can't take knowledge in that way. So I just ended up. What I'd done was essentially I kept hearing similar words constantly used, like tamen, jigga, things like that. And I started to ask, like, why are these words? Why do I keep hearing them? And so slowly I was taking these little pieces of sentences that I kept hearing, which were very, very arbitrary, very random. Kind of trying to figure out why I kept hearing them so often. And then once you get this kind of what I would like to call like a base structure for how the sentences go in Chinese, which even at that point when I was learning, it wasn't that at all. It was still very English grammar translated to Chinese kind of thing. But once you kind of get this kind of structure of how they speak and, where they're putting these words, after that, it just became a kind of right, I need to start memorizing nouns, like the names of things instead of being like, what's this and this. And I don't know, it seemed like after about 4 years, I would say, it was starting to all kind of really gel. I was starting to notice it. I was starting to get compliments from people, which isn't actually something to go off of because a lot of the time they'll compliment you even if it's really, really bad.
Ni hao.
Yeah. Oh, wow, zhou wei hong hao. Yeah, exactly. So it was all starting to kind of gel a little bit easier. I was overtaking a few of my friends as well who had been here a little bit longer than me. So I started to think that maybe there's something in this. Maybe I could get better at this. So I started to kind of just go outside. When I was going outside, I would have a sentence in my head, something new, and I would just try to put it out there, no matter the context. So people probably thought I was insane. We're talking about, we're in IKEA talking about furniture, and I'm like, what about the cupcake from the store? Like trying to put this sentence into reality because it's the one I've learned today. But by doing that, just that one sentence thing a day, I very, very quickly started to get what I call the way I learned Chinese, which is to give the sentence to a Chinese person, watch their reaction, and then let them repeat it back to you because they always will. They'll be, oh, you mean to say da 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 da. And by doing that, that really accelerated my Chinese a lot. Started to just throw sentences at Chinese people and watch them. And you're gonna make tell me.
So you're just kind of repeating words, and I guess you're preparing sentences in your head, and then practicing those with native Chinese people and seeing what the reaction is.
Basically, yeah. So, for example, like I want to. My sentence of the day is, "How do I get somewhere to a certain place?" Then you would just walk up to as many people as you can and ask them. And Chinese people are great at that. They'll look at you blankly for a moment, figure out what you're trying to say, and then they'll say, oh, you mean to say da 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 da, and they'll repeat it to you. That repeating process, for some reason, just sticks in my head every time. Every time I lose my face by not getting it right, and they correct me, it really sticks. It really sticks in my head. So that was a really, really strong method for me for the longest time. I would say once I got to a certain point with Chinese where I was very comfortable in conversation, I just kind of stopped, which wasn't great. But then I started to notice that I was very much plateauing. And I think Chinese for me, I don't know if it's for everybody, but in this kind of wild way of learning, it's very much, it boosts for a while, then it just kind of plateaus for a while, then it boosts for a while, and it plateaus for a while. And in those plateaus is where you start to think, okay, where am I at right now? Where am I at with this Chinese? What is it that I'm missing? What do I keep hearing still that I'm not repeating or I'm not using? And there's still, I mean, even right now, the strange thing about Chinese is you can hear about 95% of the sentence and still be lost. You can still be like, nah, I have no idea what that is. I have no idea. I've got 95% of this sentence that I still don't know what it is. Because if the noun's missing or the verb's missing, you get nothing.
Yeah.
You're lost. So it's occurred to me more recently, and it's something that I'm trying to do more, is just to ask more. What's the name of this? How would you say this? Or how would you use this verb? Or da-da-da-da-da. And I find that that's really helping me a lot more now. It's starting to polish off that kind of rougher Chinese that I've had up until now.
So it sounds like a really organic process for you.
Yeah, there was nothing structured about it. So yeah, I would say organic would be the word. Yeah, definitely.
I imagine going out and doing this, it required a lot of, I guess, courage. There's not a lot of people I think would be willing to go out and make that many mistakes, because I think you have to constantly be making mistakes. So what do you think carried you through that? How do you think that was a good fit for your personality?
Well, I'm a performer. Okay, so the compliments helped a lot. When you're talking to people and they're like, "What? How did you speak in Chinese? That's and you're like, yeah, okay, right, this is cool. Like, I like this. I like that people are observing this skill that I'm randomly picking up through no effort of my own at the moment." So that really got to me. The compliment level really, really got to me. I was like, this is cool. I'm learning a language. And it's a funny thing because, like, for the longest time, I didn't really think of it as learning a language. I just thought it was this tool that I needed to survive here. But the outcome of that is that you've learned a language. And I never really thought about it like that. I never set out to learn a language. I had to survive. Where I was living when I first got here was a small town called Yangzhou, and there was no English there. I still remember to this day coming home from work one night, really, really, really just tired and wanted some food. I went into a Lanzhou Lamian. And the reason, just for anyone listening who doesn't know, Lanzhou Lamian is very popular with foreigners because the wall's plastered in pictures of the food. So you can literally point at what you want and you can get it.
And it's amazingly good.
Oh, it's so good.
Love that stuff.
Oh, it's so great. But the problem is I wanted to take it away. And I still remember this to this day, 25 minutes with this woman trying to explain to her that I want it, making a bowl shape with my hand and then like a bag over the top of it with my hand and trying to and then I'm going to walk out the door with it. Can you get it? And she's just shaking her head. And I remember getting so frustrated at this lady. I didn't actually say anything to her, but my inner aggression was, you're not getting me. And then, you walk away with the food and you go eat and then you realize, no, I wasn't getting the message across. She wasn't getting me. This is my fault. I need to get better at this. So da bao was one of the most important words I ever learned in my life, was to take away food.
Da bao for you guys, that's take away. Was a wrap up, I guess, literally translated.
Yeah, throw it in a bag.
Oh. How's your quality of life changed here in Shanghai from beginning not having to be able to speak Chinese, but now being able to have a competency level in Chinese?
It's a tricky question. There's big positives and there's also big negatives. Positives being obviously the conversation level's a lot better. You find that if you're not speaking the language in China, you're always going to be outside of a glass bowl looking into China. You're never really going to be able to get inside it. You're never going to be able to really absorb yourself and understand these people or how the whole country works. Same with any country, I would imagine, but China's my only frame of reference for this. Learning the language gets you into that culture. It opens up doors to you where you can see things differently. You can understand things more. Literally, you can understand things more. The negative side to it is you start to hear people's thoughts on you as a foreign entity in the street. Or the worst one for me is elevators. A lot of the time I'll get in elevators and people around me just talking about me, just never thinking that I would be able to understand them. And it's not always negative, but when it is, it can be quite jarring. So that side of it can be a little bit jarring, as I say, but I think the positive far outweighs the negative, to be fair. And also the fact that like Chinese it's a really, really beautiful sounding language when it's used correctly. When it's spoken well, it's stunning. It's a really, really interesting, intricate language. But you very seldom hear that here, do you? You're often hearing these local dialects of the language. I don't know if your listeners know that, but like even in Shanghai alone, it's separated by I think maybe 2 or 3 variations on the Shanghai dialect, all very quite unique from each other. Mm-hmm. And the further out you go, each city has its own dialect, and it gets crazier and crazier. An old lady from Shanghai would find it difficult to converse with an old lady from Beijing. I always find that very interesting. For such a large population, the idea that intercity communication was once maybe still is a bit of an issue. It's an interesting concept.
You guys have started this YouTube channel, Mamahuhu. Well, I gotta say, one of my favorite videos is that you're in is the one where you got to outfit like a street sweeper. You're working with some of the street sweepers trying to help them clean up the streets and stuff.
Oh God, that was from the prank era. That was one of the nicer pranks. That was a real pleasure to do, actually. And the lady was just so happy to have the help.
So you're coming in there just speaking Chinese, or I forget what you were saying, but you're like, hey, I'm ready to work or something.
Yeah, I think I came in and said, hey, I'm here to help you today. And she's like, who sent you? I said, your boss told me to come down and give you a hand today. It's a really long street or something like that. Let me help you clean it up. She was great, actually. I actually see that woman still around when I go through Jiangsu Road down there. I sometimes see her still to this day and stop and give her a little hello, how's it going? I I think she remembers me because she talks to me, but I don't really, we never had a conversation about it, but I think she remembers me.
That's a good example, I think, of even being able to speak Chinese. Some of the skits you wouldn't be able to do if you didn't have Chinese.
Yeah, this is very true. My personal all-time favorite one was when I played a Shanghainese security guard for one of them. It was called the Lawai Baoan. Still to this day was my all-time favorite. It was so great. It was actually a comedian, Drew Fralick, that done this whole bit on stage, and we saw it and we said we have to make this a video. This is hilarious, and he wasn't too comfortable with the idea because it was Baoan's uniform on camera online.
So you guys, for Baoan is like a security guard at like a gate.
Should have explained that. Yeah, it's just a gate security guard.
So it's the foreign security guard. Yeah.
Yeah. So he wasn't too comfortable with wearing the uniform, and so I just jumped on it. I said, well, I'll do it. Is that okay if I do it? And he's like, yeah, sure. So I did it. It was a lot of fun. It was really, really fun.
I haven't seen that one. So tell us about it.
So it's basically my friend Andy's a foreigner walking down the street, comes and asks me directions somewhere, and then we just have an interaction.
And you're in a Baoan outfit?
I'm a Baoan. I'm literally a Baoan.
And you're speaking Chinese or English?
A mix of Chinese and Shanghainese mixed together. And the way the script was written was beautiful because it's exactly how these people, these security guards treat you. You know, it's just so, where are you going today? Why are you going there? Have you eaten today? Are you married? How many kids have you got? How much is your apartment? How much money do you make per month? Wow, I mean, that sounds really, really nice there. You know, that sounds not bad. And every time he's like, look, where is this street? Can you tell me? And I keep getting distracted and offer him cigarettes and just keep talking to him and keep him going for the longest time. And then in the end, he's like, so where's the street? And I'm like, I don't think that street exists. And that's how it ends. It was so much fun to play out. I actually went to, I don't know if I should say, but I went to another Chinese school to get a little bit of Shanghainese from them, just like how to pronounce these words a little bit better. And I went there and the guy just gave me 15 minutes of just telling me that they say it like this because of this reason, they say it like that because of this, and it really helped. So my wife is Shanghainese too, so I was taking what he said and taking it back to her and trying it with her, and she was like, nope, doesn't sound anything like Shanghainese. Nope, try again. Nope. But then I do it on the camera, and a lot of people saw it. They recognized that it was there. For the listeners, Shanghainese is it's a totally different beast.
Yeah.
It uses a whole different part of your throat. The way they talk, it's ungraspable, in fact, for the average guy. So that's why I couldn't do it.
Yeah, it's. I think, from what I understand, the tones are even more critical than.
Yeah, it's when I hear them speaking to each other, I just honestly believe in my heart that they don't understand what they're talking about either. There's no way you heard that and you took a message from that didn't happen. No way. Fake news. I could be wrong though. An example that I always use for people who are asking about it is, I'm from Shanghai. 我是上海人. For them is 我是上海人, which is just wildly different. It's a different pronunciation. They actually use different characters when they're typing as well.
Oh, I didn't realize
different
that.
characters.
I didn't realize that.
Crazy.
Well, tell us, Matt, how did you learn characters?
That was definitely a very, very sneaky, slow process that just kind of came with. It was like a byproduct of learning how to speak. And you can write it in the pinyin, the English letters to spell out the phonetic sound of Chinese.
The pinyin.
Pinyin, yeah. So I was using this on my phone while talking to people, just writing in pinyin to them. Mm-hmm. And they would reply with Chinese characters. Mm-hmm. I would then take these Chinese characters, put them into another app, translate what they said, and then reply in pinyin. This was the kind of system that I was working with for a really long time. And now thinking about it, I really feel sorry for any Chinese person talking to me at that time. They must have been like, what is going on? There was no tones or anything written above it. It was just, English.
Straight pinyin, right?
Yeah, basically English. And just weirdly, it's just the same as when I was listening to Chinese, you just start to see these repeated characters constantly used all the time. Wo, ni, ta, these just so common words. And then again, because you know how to speak it, you start to see the structure laying out in front of you through the sentences. And again, the big gaps of the verbs and the nouns, because you're not memorizing them, but you are constantly hearing these other words in between. So it was just a case of, over a long period of time, recognizing these repeated patterns in the characters and then reproducing them, essentially. The funny thing about it is that I can read Chinese off of a phone. I can type and reply back to them again, but I cannot recall the character in my brain. Like if you ask me right now the character for wo, Maybe what I could do, I can almost kind of see how it goes.
Like writing it, you mean?
Yeah, to physically
Handwriting,
write it.
yeah.
Just that recall from your brain to bring the character to the front of your head, see it, and then draw it out. I just can't, which is so bizarre that you can read something like that when it's in front of you, take it away, and you just can't.
Actually, that's pretty normal.
Is it?
That's very normal, yeah, because learning to handwrite it, it's an entirely different skill. So a lot of learners, they think, oh, well, I should read, I should learn to write too, but you can become fluent in speaking, fluent in reading, but being fluent in writing is also an entirely different skill. So I wouldn't feel bad. It's just that same type of thing as sometimes we can say a word in English, but we're not sure how to spell it. Like,
That's a very good way of putting it.
Exactly. Like automatopoeia. I could probably, we'll try.
Starts with an O, right?
There we go.
Ending with an A. We don't know that much.
I can say it, but I'm not sure how to spell it exactly.
That's
I'm probably going to get it
interesting.
wrong,
That's a very good way to put that, yeah.
So I wouldn't beat yourself up about that.
My other argument as well is that we're living in a day and age now where I'm very seldom putting pen to paper anyway in English or Chinese, so typing will do.
Yeah.
It will do. It'll do for now.
I always tell people, I said, learning to type in Chinese, fantastic. Do it. Learning to handwrite in Chinese, well, it's take a lot of work. So
yeah, it just seems like it's the last piece of the puzzle, though. You know, like we've come this far. You know, it would be cool to be able to just kind of jot down. I remember my Australian friend Tim. We were in a meeting once, and he was looking at the person talking and writing what they were saying in Chinese without looking at the paper.
Wow.
And I was just looking at the paper the whole time. I wasn't even focused on what she was saying. I just couldn't believe this guy could do this. But he'd studied here, just straight studying Chinese for 10 years. Nothing else, no other distractions. So he was right up there. Like, he was all of it. He could do it all. And that always amazes me.
That's a pretty high standard, though. Yeah.
It really amazes me. Though.
It is amazing.
I mean, even when I see Chinese children, writing and using Chinese and interacting with the Chinese language, I still think just wow, because it's so big. It's just a huge beast of a thing to try and comprehend.
Well, if you see the amount of homework they have to do, I had kids in Chinese school, so it's yeah. But it takes a lot to keep that up. But yeah, I wouldn't worry about that too much. Yeah, I remember when I was learning Chinese, I found back where you're doing QQ days. Perhaps this happened with you, but simply typing out the pinyin and seeing the characters come up, you're like, I guess that's it. I'm going to select those. And
absolutely. Yeah. So you're actually letting the technology help you out there a little bit, because you write in the pinyin, it gives you a selection of maybe 1,000 different characters, but it's usually that first to third one that's going to be the character. And if you have enough in your head that you can recall what it kind of looks like, you can select it.
Well, tell me about, did you have any breakthrough moments that you can think of where sometimes you were out there trying to use your Chinese and all of a sudden you just had a breakthrough moment or something really clicked in your head?
Honestly, every time I'm drunk. Every time, which is not very often. You know, I'm quite clean these days. Yeah, I've always found with I don't know if it's the same in every language across the world. Again, this is my only frame of reference, but as soon as you get a couple of beers, it just all loosens. And I'm not sure to this day whether I'm actually speaking better or I just feel I'm speaking better. But it's definitely what you said there, that breakthrough, that like, no hold barred anymore. You're just speaking, trying to get your message across instead of processing in your brain how's the best way to say this. You're just letting it flow out. So they're big breakthrough moments, and I do actually learn things from them. I've had drunken nights where I've said some things and just been like, wow, where did that come from? I'm gonna try and remember that. As far as sober breakthrough moments, I've had moments where I've surprised myself. Vocabularies came out of my mouth, and I've immediately thought, now where the hell did I learn that word? You know, just out of nowhere, especially working on film set when you're translating for a foreign director or something like that, and he asks for a specific thing, and just so weirdly in the moment, it just comes from nowhere. You're just, actually, yes, I do know how to say that, and then it just comes out. I find that quite unusual. Can't remember any specific words to give you an example, but just words that I would never generally use. Mm-hmm. Just appear in your brain somehow. Maybe you've heard somebody say it in a classroom once or in a different situation. It's just kind of stuck there for some reason. The brain's incredible. Let me tell you, it's an incredible thing, especially with language.
What are some of the hardest times you've had in learning Chinese?
The early days, day-to-day stuff. Just the frustration of, man, I know what you just said to me and I have the answer for you. I just can't alliterate it, and you start to feel like I don't know where the frustration comes from, though, because you know yourself, you know your capabilities, you know that you're only so good at this language, so you shouldn't be surprised that you can't do this. But I can remember a few times people talking to me and maybe, I know exactly what he said to me. All I have to do is reply to this, and I can't get the words out. I can't find the word, or I'm saying it wrong. In fact, I've got one that trumps that completely. I've got one that beats that completely, is taxi drivers. I don't know how long I'm going to have to be in this country before they start understanding me properly. I feel like anybody I talk to now understands me in Chinese, but something about taxi drivers. I think their expectation is you don't know Chinese, so their ears are tuned for something. They're tuned for English, or they're awaiting something that's not clean Chinese. So you can often see that when you actually do speak to them, one of two things will happen. They'll just kind of shake their hand and be like, don't know, show me on your phone, let me see, where is it you want to go? Or they will genuinely jump in shock, and they will, what? Oh, you speak Chinese? Oh, this is fantastic. All right, where would you like to go? So it's either one of those two reactions, but I've definitely had some frustrated times of just repeating the same words over and over and over to taxi drivers. You know, Wu Wei Lu. Ah? Wu Wei Lu. Ah? Okay, I'm going to do it one more time. Wu Wei Lu. No. And then you show them it and they're like, oh, Wu Wei Lu. I'm like, yeah, no, that's what I said, mate. That's exactly what I said. It's very frustrating.
Well, knowing what you know now, if you could go back and do anything different along your journey of learning Chinese, what would you do differently?
I would take a class. In the first day that I got here, I would sit down in a school and I would take a class on just basic sentence structure. Just how they structure sentences. And I know grammar to anybody, even if it's your own grammar, is quite a daunting thing. But just to have that little base knowledge there, that little just, hey, look, while you're listening to this, while you're hearing all these random words and trying to piece them together, just know that this is how they're putting them together. Whether you know the words or not will come, but just learn the structure in which they use them, because the automatic reaction is, oh, I've learned these words in Chinese now, and then you place them out in an English grammatical sentence, and it really confuses Chinese people. Some of them are very, very quick to be like, I know what you're doing, because maybe they know a little bit of English, but it really confuses them. So I would say, I would go back to my younger self, and I would say, just sit down, focus for 10 minutes, Matt, in the classroom, and learn some grammar just to know how to structure it. That's what I would do. Because other than that, I mean, there's only so many sounds in Chinese, and then all you're doing is changing the tones, you know? So once you've kind of learned all these sounds, you just need to know which ones go where and how to use the tones for them. But it's that sentence structure that's so alien from English. It's really important that you get that. If you can get that, I think everything else would fall into place quite quickly after that, I think.
You feel that would have boosted your progress?
Yeah.
Speed of your progress.
I think a lot of my time was wasted just trying to figure out where to put ta and where to put ni and where to put dan shi and you know how to separate the sentence. So that was a real big waste of time. If I just sat down for an hour's class in grammar, I probably would have picked that up really, really quickly. Instead, I spent 2 to 3 years mulling it over in my head. But then, I mean, the upside to that is probably that it's very well ingrained in my head now. It's something that I've taught myself, so it's something that my teaching method works really well for me because it's me. So it's probably quite well ingrained now. Probably more so than it would have been from a class, but still, just to have that base. To answer your question, a little grammar class.
A little grammar class for you, yeah. Yeah, I can understand how that would be. If you could give any advice to someone who's learning Chinese right now, what would you say to them?
I would say don't try to grasp it all. Don't try to cover it all. Figure out what it is you're going to be doing with this language and focus on that, because as a byproduct, you will learn all this other stuff too. Choose something that you're interested in. Choose something that you want to know. Something that so for instance, if you're into making videos, then focus on video-related Chinese, because you'll get really into it. One of the ways that I always remembering Chinese is a good example is potato. Mm-hmm. Now their translation is 土豆. Chinese is 土豆. The translation of that is mud bean. Mm-hmm. And you look at a potato, that's exactly what it is. So it's impossible for me to forget that word now, because it's such a great description of what it is you're looking at that you kind of forget it. So that I think that's a really, really helpful thing.
Yeah, John, his favorite word is daishu, kangaroo. It's the bag rat.
Bag rat.
Bag rat, daishu.
That's too good. That's exactly. Again, it's such a perfect description, and it makes you smile to hear it broken up like that. There's no way you'll forget it. I won't forget this now.
There you go.
Next time I see my Aussie friends, I'm going to call them that.
The bag rat.
It's a bag rat.
How's learning Chinese changed your life?
It's made me appear much cooler to my friends back home. Yeah, that's for real. My friends back home think that this is just, well, I won't even try to do their impersonation of what they think it is, but they think it's just a bunch of noises all smashed together. They can't believe that this is something that can come out of my mouth, especially since I'm a Scottish guy. I'm speaking very politely right now, but to them, to go from Scottish to learning Chinese it's wonderful in their eyes. Even though I'm just going home and saying things like Jiangsu Lu, and they're like, "Whoa, wow, you're Chinese, man! That's amazing!" And all you're doing is naming a street. You don't have to be very good to appear to be good. In a general sense, it's made me, it's given me more work options for a start. A lot of my work now is on-set translations, doing translations for different kinds of foreigner film companies that are here, directors and things like that. So it's opened up a whole world there for me. Also, the acting side of it, I can do Chinese acting as well, which is, again, lots of fun. And as I was saying to you before, this weird thing about memorizing Chinese scripts, it seems to me to be far easier than memorizing an English script. And I think purely the reason is because the value and experience that you attach to English, you know how it should sound, you know exactly what you're going for, what the script wants, what the emotion should be. Whereas with Chinese, it's a large grouping of sounds that you have to get out of your mouth and get across to the other person. The depth of meaning and understanding of it isn't there like it is with English or anybody's native language. So for me to memorize and regurgitate that is a lot easier than to memorize the feeling and why am I saying this in English and what's the reason that I want to say this. Apart from work, actually there's lots of different reasons why you would learn it though, but I think most of them are very much work motivated with Chinese. It's such a complicated language that if you're going to sit down and learn this language, it seems to me like you've got to have some kind of goal with it. I feel like people learn French and Spanish and things like that because it sounds beautiful and it's a nice hobby to learn something like that, and you can read it as an English speaker. But to sit down and learn Chinese, it always seems to me that anyone who I know who's really going at it and studying it is for one of two reasons. They either really love Asian culture or Chinese culture and they want to get in about it, or for work. To answer your question, work has really, really helped me with this, and just general day-to-day in China, and speaking and understanding when my wife is angry with me, because she only uses Chinese when she's angry.
We have an angry Chinese woman yelling at you. That's a whole new experience.
And Shanghainese as well, so that little bit extra attitude in there as well, which is real nice.
You have been listening to the You Can Learn Chinese podcast. Help us spread the word by sharing this with your friends, classmates, teachers, cousins, nurse, runner, therapist, author, scientist, excavator, genealogist, and that one guy named Peter. You can subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And please, write us a review so we know how we're doing. You can find us on Facebook and at mandarincompanion.com. Apologies to John Cena, we just ran out of time. The You Can Learn Chinese podcast is produced by myself, Jared Turner, and our editor is Kaiser Guo at SupChina. I'd like to thank our guest interview, Matt McGill, and of course, thanks to my co-host, the man, the myth, the legend, John Passy. See you next time.